The format of tonight's meeting is to have a guest speaker share their experience, strength and hope on how the Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery is working in their lives for 15 to 20 minutes. Tonight we've asked Pete to share.
Thanks, mate. My name's Peter, I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be in my home group, and it's a bit hot to share, but we'll give it a crack. My last night in my home group, moving back to New Zealand in a couple of days to live, so I'm grateful for the chance to come up here and say thanks to this group, for your love and support over the last 2 years. This group's been an anchor for me, week in, week out, no doubt about it. It's been a solid base. I'm very grateful for it, that there's guys turning up week in, week out, setting up and telling me how to live and showing me how to live out there. It's not always easy. I was just thinking actually when Matt was reading the preamble, you're losing one New Zealander but you've gained another, so sort of, it always evens out of it. And, I guess even though I'm a New Zealander and, majority of people in here are Australian and some English and stuff, we're very similar, it's very similar traits and stuff, and, we've all got one thing in common or a couple of things in common. That's what we talked about, in the book study tonight, that's... I take a drink, I develop a phenomenon of craving, and I can't stop drinking. And that thing that happens before I take a drink, that madness that centres in my mind, that madness, that strange thinking that tells me to take a drink no matter what's going on. So, no matter what my story is, that's what, that's how you and I identify tonight. And, welcome to the new guys. Really pleased to see you here. Jamie with 7 days, and the other guys returning and, coming back and stuff. And I got sober in the winter of 1997, which gives me about 15 and a half years, and when I came in, and that's, straight from the get-go, that's through the higher power and Alcoholics Anonymous, a little bit of me, but majority of higher power and Alcoholics Anonymous. And, when I was first here, if someone said they were 15 years sober, I wouldn't get my head around it. Maybe if someone was 6 months or something, I could relate to that, but not 15 years. In fact, there was this guy who shared here, Aussie Neil. He was 14 years sober when I was brand new, and he shared, he goes, my name's Neil, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm 14 years sober. And that just, blew my mind. And I couldn't comprehend it. And then, I remember sitting there, the very next thought I had was, 14 years sober and you're doing meetings. What a loser. But, and here I am, 15 years sober, doing meetings. But I think the difference is, back then, I was... I was struggling, I was white-knuckling it, and, I knew the necessity of having to do meetings and stuff, and today it's a bit different. Today I still know that I need to do meetings, still know I need to ring my sponsor, still know I need to connect with you guys, still know I need to read the book and do the drill and all that stuff that, someone who's 7 days or, a month or whatever has to do, but today, I want to do that stuff more than I have to, I know I have to, but I also want to do it, so that's the difference. But, something Neil said to me, or me and the group that night, was that... if it's possible for him, it's possible for me. So, that's my message. Any guy that's new, if it's possible for me, it's possible for you. So, that said, quickly about my drinking and stuff. And, the book talks about how liquor is but a symptom. We have to get down to causes and conditions. And I was going to touch a bit on that tonight, really. And, before I took a drink, I developed a whole lot of ideas that sort of shaped my life and thing. And the first one I developed was my idea of God. When I was about 5, I got thrown in a Catholic school, and I hated school from the day one. And on the very first day, at morning tea time, I had my backpack on the back and I was heading for the gates, and I wanted to leave with a nun. There were nuns and priests, and the nun grabbed me by the ears and pulled me back in. And I hated nuns from then. I hated priests, and I was very confused about God. I heard that in Catholicism they talk about, heaven and hell. And at the age of 5, I was telling lies and I was stealing from the cookie jar, and I knew I was going to hell. So I was afraid of God. So I had that idea about God. And then when I got to 10, I was introduced to baptism and New Age Christianity and stuff, and guys speaking in tongues and doing the shaking and things. And that really confused me. So what I'm trying to say is I've got some very old ideas about God. And the next thing that shaped me really was surrender. when I was about 8, I used to play this game with my brother Marty, and I love my brother to bits. And what he used to do, he used to get me in the hallway where I had nowhere to run, and he used to hold me down. I'd be lying on my back like that, and my arms would be big like this, and he'd pin his knees on my arms so I couldn't get away. And he'd twist my bloody nipple, and having your nipple twisted by a girl's alright, but your big brother giving it a big twist, it used to bloody hurt. And he used to go to me, surrender. And the game was he'd go surrender, and my game was I'd say no, never, and he'd be doing these things, twist my nipple, and he'd lean across me, and he used to have this dribble of spit coming out, and he'd stop it just before his face, and he'd be going surrender, and I would never surrender. And then he'd make all this noise, and the old man would come out and take his belt off and threaten to thrash us, and so that would end the game. And so what I'm trying to say is I got these ideas early on that I'd never surrender, And at school they teach us about the Anzacs, in the trenches and stuff, and you'd picture those guys, and it's dark and it's very scary, and bombs are going off and things, and guys are dying around them, and they're pooing themselves and they wean themselves and things, and they're very scared, and they know they're going to die, and the call comes in from the British guy. They're sitting back. The call comes in, and he goes, "Go forward." He goes, "Go forward." And the Aussie guy looked at the New Zealander, and he goes, "Are you ready, copper?" And the New Zealander would have said, "Sweet mate, let's go." And even though those guys knew that they were going to die, they got up over the trench and they walked across the dead bodies in front of us, and they got shot down and died. And then the next wave after them would go. Our teachers drummed it into us. You don't surrender. And that's how I grew up. And the All Blacks never surrendered, and the Australian cricket team never surrendered. And so that's I formed that picture of never surrender, never ask for help, and never cry at funerals. The other thing that I didn't sort of shape me a bit was that I always felt a little bit awkward. I always felt a little bit at unease. I always felt a little bit different from the rest of us. If I was on the sports field and there were 2 captains selecting teams for fielding, doing whatever game, and one captain over here and one captain over there, and they'd pick him and they'd pick her and stuff, I'd always stand in the group, and I'd always develop this fear that I was going to get left out and get picked last and stuff, and come down to me and the fat girl with glasses, and, trying to say, I'm awkward, I'm not fitting in, I'm not comfortable. And the other thing, the fourth thing that shaped me a bit was that I saw heavy drinking alcoholism in my family. I come from very heavy drinking dad, and I come from state housing, Carisbrook, New Brighton, Christchurch, New Zealand, windows broken, my mum wearing jandals in the winter so us kids didn't have to, tough conditions. I suppose it's a bit like commission flats over here and stuff. And I've seen what drinking done, and I had hope that I wasn't going to be like that. I had hope, and at the age of 8 I made a decision, conscious decision at the age of 8 that I wasn't going to be that like that. My life was going to be different. I wasn't going to drink. I saw my uncle do something, and I thought, that's what I want to be. I want to be loving and kind like that. But I got through life and stuff, and got to 15, and like we do, took a drink. Took a drink, even though I'd seen it and stuff. I still took a drink, and it was all right. I felt very comfortable for the first time in my life. I felt very comfortable. It was only beer, and I like what it done for me. It gave me a sense of ease that it does. It differentiates me from other drinkers, and that was all right for the first few 6 months. Just drank a few beers, and then I went to this party. My first 21st, so I'm like about 15 and a half years age now, and there were these guys there that rode motorbikes and stuff, and I sort of idolised those guys a bit really. And I was in the lounge, and I went with 2 mates, and they're outside, and I was sort of in there on my own and that, and drinking my little beers and things, and this bottle of rum went around. I grabbed the bottle of rum and I took a couple of swigs and I passed it on, and my shoulders went back and my chest was out, and bloody this Kiss song came on the radio, on the loudspeakers. The speaker was right next to me, that song, I was made for loving you. Suddenly, the room started spinning a wee bit, and then that bottle of rum came around, and I took another swig, and mate, the world started spinning, and I intuitively knew what to do, and that was leave. And I staggered out of that lounge and made it to the doorway. And as soon as I got outside, the fresh air hit me, and being bloody New Zealanders, there was this big session of dope going on. I had to walk through this dope, and someone grabbed me and blew this dope down my mouth, and I was very, very ill. And I managed to stagger over to this garage and lie down by this garage. And I don't know for how long, but I lay there throwing up all over myself and pissed my pants and stuff, of course. And eventually I heard my friends calling out, Pete, where are you? And they come and found me, and they carried me, on all fours like that to the chute, and they took me home, and on the back of the chute, and I was riding home on the back of the chute, covered in piss and spew and God knows what, looking up, and it was a starry night, and I was looking at the stars thinking, fucking awesome, I had a great time, and couldn't wait for that to happen, you know, and just knew not to drink rum. Everything else was okay, you know, and you know, when I was 16, on my 16th birthday, I went to a hotel. You know, I could get into hotels, and I was 16, and I got introduced to Southern Comfort. And life took on new meaning. Loved Southern Comfort. From then I was into Southern Comfort, tequila and whatever, you know. And, you know, mezcal, you get those bottles of mezcal, and got the little worm or whatever at the bottom of the bottle, and people would go, you know, stay away from the worm. I wanted that worm, you know. I wanted to get that worm and get the biggest hit that I could possibly get. And, you know, I was a daily pot smoker about that time and stuff, and but something happened that showed me that I crossed the line. I was with one of my best friends, old Brownie, and we were driving out to Mosquito Point for a swim. It was a nice night like this, probably not as hot, but a nice night like this, and we were driving in his old Holden station wagon, and which I'd sold to him to buy a bag of dope, which we were smoking. And he had a stubby in between his legs as he was driving, and I had a stubby in his hand, and he passed me the joint, and I took a toke, and just driving along, probably listening to talking heads, you know, what you doing? All of a sudden the car veered off, and it was heading straight for this lamppost, and we're on this big grass beach. I thought I was going to smoke it up or something, whatever, and I just kept on going for this lamppost, and bang, we hit this lamppost, and sort of came around, and my first thought was how impressed I was that I didn't spill my beer and I was still holding the joint. And I looked over at Brandy, and Brandy got out of the car, and he goes running to the front of his car, and it's all smashed up, and he's going, oh my God, I'm never going to drink again, and the police are coming, and what are my parents going to say? And I remember standing there thinking, who am I going to get wasted with tomorrow night? You know, I'd crossed that line from where drinking had become, you know, a fun thing. I crossed that line to who am I going to get wasted with that tomorrow night? And, you know, from that day on till I finished drinking at the age of 28, you know, I suffered from the great obsession that all alcoholics suffer, that someday, somehow, I'm going to control and enjoy my drinking, you know, and that day never arrived, and I tried everything that, you know, a lot of people in this room tried, and, you know, the girlfriend, you know, I tried moving to Sydney one time and pissed on the plane and got into a fight over a game of pool the very first night I was there, and went back to New Zealand, and different jobs, had like 30 jobs and all these different apartments, flats, cars. Nothing worked, and got to this very, very lonely place that progressed to my illness from being the happy, lucky guy, you know, and to this very, very lonely place, wanting to die. Not going to kill myself because I knew about heaven and hell, and I knew that you kill yourself, mate, you go to hell. And I wasn't going to do that, and my ego was a bit too big for it. But if you had said, here, Pete, here's a pill, take this pill, no one will know, slip on out, I would have gladly taken that pill, you know. I was hopeless. Someone gave a beautiful description of it tonight in the book study, you know. I couldn't live with alcohol or pot, you know, but I couldn't live without it. And I surrendered, and I made my way to Alcoholics Anonymous, and from that day, you know, I haven't had a drink. But anybody can get sober, and Matt said it tonight in the book study, anybody can get sober, and, you know, 2 days sober, I was physically sober then in my drinking. If I didn't drink for 2 days and was physically sober, is what I am tonight. You know, anybody can stop. But the trick is, how do I stay stopped? The trick is, how do I stay stopped and comfortable in life when I don't fit in? When I've got all these warped ideas about God, you know, and all those 4 things that I mentioned before, and causes and conditions. And through this process, you know, behind me, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I uncover, discover and discard all those ideas, and you know, I find a way to live in comfort and peace out there. And you know, my life's a lot different today. You know, today I've got a beautiful wife who I love and adore. I got married when I was drinking, hated it, and I married her anyway. You know, and standing there in the morning of my wedding, going with a glass of whiskey in my hand, going, I'm not going through this. And my brother goes, these people have driven 3 hours to come to this wedding, you're going through it. And went through it, and destroyed that relationship and localised other relationships, you know, through my alcoholism. But it's not like that today. Today, you know, through coming here and, you know, having a good sponsor in Mark J and stuff, you know, I've learned how to live for life of love and tolerance and patience and kindness and understanding. Total opposite of where I was, you know. I'm self-centred. I'm greedy. I'm an alcoholic. I'm the guy that stands in front of my best mate's car going, thinking about myself, not about my mate. You know, that's who I am. You know, when I'm drinking, you got a girlfriend, mate, she's all right, she's ugly, whatever. A few drinks, I'm going after her, you know, and I'll never go down on history, but I'll go down on your mum, you know. And, that's how we live, you know. That's where alcoholism took me. But anyway, it's not like that today, and you know, there's this guy named Paul Heff, and you know, he's probably got about 30 years sobriety now. And when I was, you know, brand new cab on the rank or whatever, he said a very important thing to me. He goes, you know, He goes, shut up and listen. He goes, he goes, take the cotton wool out of your ears and put it in your mouth. And he's got this real big, shut up and listen voice. And he goes, you don't get well in meetings listening to your own voice. Shut up and listen. So I did. I sat down, I listened. He got up and talked for half an hour. That was my first resentment in AA. But, that's a good word, And back in New Zealand, we get to speak at every single meeting we go to. And I don't like that. I like coming here to Melbourne. I can go 3 weeks and just listening to other guys, and that's been a great benefit to me. But, I just want to quickly finish on 2 things, really. And the first one is, talk about Tradition 1 and how important Alcoholics Anonymous is to me and how important that we are, And Bill W. wrote that, if we don't stick together, then AA dies. And I know that without AA, I'm a dead duck. I'm doomed, no doubt about it. And I know for a lot of guys in this room, it's the same case, And this home group and those boys at the deal, it's shown me a good way of life. I know what a home group's all about now, and I encourage members of this home group to stick together. And you see someone slacking off, tell them, mate, you're slacking off. What's going on? For the risk of hurting someone's feeling, save a life. And you have a conscience meeting, get to the conscience meeting. I said to my sponsor, I've got to work late, can't go to the conscience meeting. The phone went all quiet. Thought, here we go. Said the wrong thing again. And he goes, Pete, you ever knock off work early to go to the pub? Yes, I did. He goes, you knock off work and get to that conscience meeting. You got a whole month to let your boss know that every Thursday at the end of the month you got to be in South Melbourne by 6 o'clock. Simple, And by doing that, I've got a big benefit out of that. So the guys around me. And the other thing, obviously, that I just want to thank, all the guys in this group. I've seen a lot of transformations and stuff, and I don't want to single anybody out, because if I single anybody out, I'm going to miss people out. I don't want to do that, And I've had the pleasure of, sponsoring guys as well in this group and out of this group, and that's been a blessing. You've really helped me. And I will mention, one person, Johnny H. It's been a blessing being able to sponsor you. I've spoken to Johnny every day on the phone. About 18 months or whatever, just hardly missed a day, and I'm not sure what life's going to be like without Johnny, but we're going to find out. So, sticking together, we can do what I can't do alone. I couldn't get sober alone, but with you guys I got sober. I can't live out there alone, but with you guys, I can live. I found a way to live. And Bill Wilson wrote this beautiful promise of the forward of the 12 and 12. He goes, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are a set of principles, spiritual in nature, that enable the sufferer to expel the obsession to drink and to become useful and live a wholesome life. Pretty close to that, and today my life is very useful and very whole, and there's a bunch of guys in this room that I would, get up in the middle of the night and go and help, and those guys know who they are. And those guys know that I would do that as well. I'd gladly get out of my bed in the middle of the night. I don't know how gladly, but I'll definitely get out of my bed in the middle of the night. And I like my bed, and I like cuddling up to my wife, And I like the fact that my little boy's in the next room and stuff. But I would get out of that bed and I'd go across town and I'd help someone. Not because I want, brownie points or because I'm a good guy, or any of that sort of stuff, but because that's what you guys have shown me and taught me to do, live a life of love and service. And if I live a life of love and service, then I become useful and whole, and then I become joyous, happy and free. And that's the great paradox of AA. If I get to the 12 steps, I become full of love, and I become full of service, and I become free of the great obsession myself, which I found out is my problem myself. So thanks very much.